Welcome to BasedSpace, a crypto podcast. BasedSpace.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
We're doing well, brother.
Pretty well.
We're just talking about the cream exploit that happened.
Oof, yeah, I was actually talking to Leo Chang about a week and a half ago.
Oh snap! Who is Leo?
He's one of the co-founders from Cream. So I think all the guys over there are pretty hardworking and pretty cool people. So it's unfortunate that this happened to them.
Yeah, man. I mean, we hear about these things all the time. I think the industry is so new, we're still figuring out the kinks.
No, yep, 100%. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We're pumped to have you here as well. My name is Mewtwo, and I'm the founder of the BasedSpace, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Chase and Super.
What up, Irvin?
Hey, Irvin, how's it going? Welcome to BasedSpace.
Hey guys, super excited.
Who's on the OpenEra account? Are they gonna speak, or is it just you?
It's
Hi
just
there.
me. Yeah, it's Fina.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since we haven't had you guys on here before, we always like to get started by kind of asking, like, how'd you guys get started in crypto?
Yeah, sure. Do you want the long story or the short story or the medium size story?
Whatever you feel like giving.
Yeah, whatever story you want to go down.
Yeah.
All right. So personally, myself, I started in crypto back in 2012, and it was just honestly through my sister who was in computer science. So pretty early on, she kind of pushed me to kind of explore crypto, and so around that time, I was learning how to code, and pretty much launched a Bitcoin startup, like super early. A lot of haters from traditional finance, and it's called Decentral Bank. Actually, if you click on my profile, you see like a link on the tag post from back in the days. And so pretty much, ended up getting deep into the space, talking to folks on Bitcoin Talk, Peter Todd and stuff like that. And then I think it was a bit of like 2 harsh years from 2012 to 2014 when, Bitcoin was still becoming known around the space. And around 2014, I'd say, when a lot of like the traditional investors and people started catching on, we ended up exiting our startup successfully. And it was right after this big event that we did for Citibank. And so that's how I really got started. From then on, around that time, there were talks about Ethereum. There was like the Rare Pepe's launch that came out, later on in 2016, 2017. And pretty much ended up, going down the rabbit hole since then and working alongside different projects. So a lot of the open source protocols that I've been involved behind the scenes doing research and implementing stuff. But also throughout the time, honestly, particular on an academic level, I was not only doing Bitcoin and blockchain research, I was also looking into gaming and in particular immersive reality tech and this notion of telepresence, which essentially it encompasses the ability to kind of be present remotely, either to a virtual or a physical avatar. So if it's a physical avatar, it's essentially a robot. So being able to see, hear, and feel the remote environment. And if it's through a virtual avatar, it's either in a virtual space. And so this includes, kind of like the ability to receive feedback as a human being. And so when you think about the future really of the metaverse, and you think about physical avatars and virtual avatars, the notion of crypto economics and the ability to interact with these avatars in a peer-to-peer fashion makes more sense. And so that is really, long story short, on my end. It also involves, some things that I did at Goldman Sachs from 2015 to 2017, where I led blockchain strategy, and also stuff that I did in Asia that relate to gaming and crypto. But that I would say is like the long story short, really, in terms of how I got into crypto.
Yeah, very, very, very cool. Yeah, I know you've led blockchain strategy at Goldman Sachs. I'm super curious about that. Like, what was that like to work at like a traditional bank and kind of work in their crypto division over there?
Oof, but honestly, like if there's anybody that's been in the space since like 2011 and 2012, you've seen like kind of things change drastically. Where I remember back in 2012, when we wanted to like discuss, like Bitcoin with like traditional banks and firms who were doing kind of like this innovation challenges. They would kind of look at you weird with the concept of like, hey, this is new money or new sound money. It's peer to peer. Because it didn't make sense, right? Towards 2014, 2015, kind of them catching on. And so during that time, I was presenting actually a research on just like a peer-to-peer distribution system at a conference. And then it was like, I think it was 2014, 2015 around the time I exited, and ended up meeting someone from Goldman Sachs. It was a partner. And he's like, hey, it seems like you're doing a lot of great work here. We here at Goldman are also thinking, about the next technologies. And they're like, we're a tech company. And, this is the first thing they told me back in the day. So no, this was pretty young. He's like, so don't mistake me with a suit. We're a full tech company, and we're looking to bring on board people who can, guide us towards the future. And so, from my end at that time, I was pretty heavy onto Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, these banks are essentially, intermediators. They don't allow you to perform peer-to-peer transactions without taking a cut. We can look at the remittance market, and back then, for example, I think up to 2014, there's a lot of talks on M-Pesa, which is this company in Africa that essentially allows people to make payments through their cards, and so it was really hard to kind of break into this market, right? And kind of say that Bitcoin is a new sound money that can allow for, trustless peer-to-peer transactions. So I was kind of like, all right, it seems interesting. I would like to know the monster from inside out. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll join for a co-op. Ended up joining, and like, if you seriously go back like on Bitcoin talking, you see people talking about banks, they're always talking about these kind of like them being outdated, entities. They talk about the mainframes, and they talk about, how they're thinking backwards. And so in all honesty, I would say that there were institutions at that time, I'm not going to name, of course, any, they were a bit outdated. Like they were using mainframe technology, and technologies are really outdated, and they had no innovation strategy back then. But Goldman Sachs in particular was pretty advanced. They were thinking about all this stuff beforehand. So, but the only difference from these other banks that you now hear, like BNY, JP Morgan, was that Goldman Sachs was or is not the first mover, right? So they're behind the scenes, kind of scoping the market and seeing, okay, is this what's going to happen? Is JP Morgan going to come on board? Okay, what's the strategy? And so in reality, from a business perspective, that makes sense because it takes a lot of time and resources and money to kind of be the first mover. And so GS, honestly, like from our discussions, was that, they want to kind of see whether something fails, and if it fails, to go ahead and launch it and make it better, or if it succeeds, to go ahead and take these lessons and make the next better product. So those are my key takeaways. But again, like any traditional bank back in 2015, which is the time that I officially joined, to like 2017, was still in the research phase. Right around that time, people were now coining these notions of distributed ledger technology, which essentially were private blockchains, and so nobody really want to come board and say we're going to use tokens to optimize our back office work. And then Goldman Sachs was the first one to come with this notion of a coin that you can use behind the scenes. So it was a very interesting, but again, always bureaucratic and still a bit slow to move. Particularly because these are regulated entities. But in some, I'd say that Goldman Sachs is honestly one of the most advanced financial firms in there. They're pretty small compared to other big banks in terms of size, and also their big goals and products.
I love that. Yeah, because dude, it's crazy to see like where you've witnessed the entire transformation of banks basically bashing Bitcoin and crypto, and now we see banks kind of starting to FOMO into the space and start to accept blockchain as a technology. So that's a pretty cool perspective. I don't think we've heard before on the space.
I'm actually curious, like in your eyes, like what do you think is one of the biggest blockers from a lot of these like higher, larger corporations adopting blockchain technology, like public blockchain technology?
So, like I'll probably back off a bit and say that, so from a conceptual level, right? Um, Essentially, blockchains or any kind of blockchain technology allows you to disintermediate trust. But in exchange for that trust, you're always going to pay some kind of fee or financial for every financial transaction or kind of transaction that you make. And this happens when you look into proof of work, when you look into proof of stake, you're paying for trust. But this trust is quote unquote decentralized or disintermediated. Now, when you're performing, peer-to-peer financial transactions or any transaction of economic nature in traditional markets, right? You're still paying for that trust. You're paying the bank some sort of fee, whether you know it or you don't, or you do, or you think you don't. If you have some kind of savings or checkings account, for example, like we're opening up a business account, they're like, okay, you have to keep, like over $10,000, otherwise you get charged a fee. Okay, well, why? Because they have to manage our money. They have to manage our ledgers. Uh, and so honestly, that is the business model for financial institutions. So at one point or another, whether admit it or not, being able to use some kind of public ledger that provides this kind of decentralized trust, right, and allows for peer-to-peer transactions, and it kind of destroys their business model in a sense. That's like at a conceptual level, I would say. Now, the other part, because there's a lot of use cases where, outside of like, financial transactions where blockchain could be used internally, and this is the back office work um, that blockchain could be used. And so the problem then is, how do you integrate this kind of open source software, that could or could not be audited into a regulated workflow? And so that is a huge constraint. And so if you ever worked into a large corporation, in particular in the financial industry, they get regulated. Even if you try to, like, for example, if you're a software engineer, you're essentially gated within what packages or open source software you can use. It has to be vetted beforehand. A lot of times, honestly, when I was there, and even other financial institutions that I consulted for, we were using like Node.js libraries that were like almost a year old. And the reason for that is because someone had done, the due diligence check, or they got audited to make sure that there's nothing that could, affect or interact with the pieces of software internally. And so on that notion, like thinking about that, just being able to have something that's public or public contributor, there's that constraint, right? That financial institutions are regulated. But honestly, I would say that, let me see, I don't want to say like it's a percentage, but I'd say probably like 70 to 80 or 90% of some of these divisions within banks that are working on blockchain tech know that the core value is in public infrastructure, right? Because there's a huge shift early on in the 2000s, when open source software became big, when you start seeing Hadoop, Kafka, MongoDB, even partially, having this freemium model, and Red Hat coming on board, where, banks were like, snap, I'm here tied up with this licensed software, from IBM and Microsoft, while everyone else is getting ahead. And so then they started adopting open source software. Like huge institutions and other corporations use products like Hadoop, Kafka, and the Apache product. It's become the de facto. And so whenever, went off, I was in Goldman Sachs or went to other like financial institution, they know that there's a lot of value in truly open source software that has large communities, because it gets audited faster, it gets evolves faster. And so they know. And one example to completely give you, and I don't mean to bash this project, but I think it was it was around 2016, 2015, R3 consortium. If you look up R3 consortium, they kind of created this consortium for financial institutions to develop some quote unquote distributed ledger technology, so quote unquote like a private or consortium ledger. And so fine, a lot of banks had to essentially like jump on board and say, okay, we'll give you, a few grand, etc., and we'll join the consortium, and you can essentially give us research, right, in terms of how we can use blockchain, and it's good PR overall. So they went on for I think about 2 years, and by year two, they were like, okay, you know what, we're gonna go for our second round and also increase the amount of funding that we want from consortium members, and probably about half of them dropped. And I was like, honestly, I mean, I don't mean to say in a bad way, but it's a business decision also that where I was the one that said, this doesn't make sense for us to continue this consortium. Like I gave the thumbs down and we stepped out. And, we as Goldman Sachs were like the biggest player there in this consortium, right? And the reason was because we sat behind the scenes and said, okay, where is this technology going? Does it make sense to have, private or consortium blockchains in a 10-year to 20-year, expansion? And, the answer is probably most likely no. In the short term, yeah, because regulation hasn't really caught up. Markets have not adopted the technology, but in the long term, they will. And so it's just a matter of time. But again, that's a quick, really summary. One of them is regulatory oversight, and in terms of how markets moves. Financial institutions are regulated by the government, and the other part is really, how do you introduce a technology into software that is either outdated or that does not have the right components to integrate into blockchain. But people are working on these problems and these questions.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. I could sit here all night and ask you questions around that, because that really kind of hits on a lot of my interest of, the more corporate side adoption and what that looks like for the larger ecosystem at play. But, switching gears there, getting back to OpenEra, like how continue your story of your history. How did you find your way to OpenEra?
Yeah, so I think, personally, when I first learned about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and I looked at the IRC chats and everything, it's just a very futuristic conversation that took place. Even back then, where they didn't have much sense or notion of, of financial markets or, traditional Keynesian economics, you kind of understood what was going on, some of the problems that were there, right? And at the same time, honestly, probably like I think most people that are in tech, you kind of imagine a future where you have, robots, or you have this kind of high tech being evolved, right? And so it honestly, if you think about it, it almost all comes together. And so, along those lines, we always started discussing about games, early on, and how you can use crypto or Bitcoin within games, right, to simulate some kind of real world economy with value. And so, throughout this past years, I was always building different games. I really got heavy into academic research, doing, game image development, and then started pretty much like going from there. And so, at some point, I ended up, leaving Goldman Sachs, and then on the side, I was doing like different kinds of like projects, like personal projects related to gaming and robots. And then when I went to Asia, I was in Korea and Japan for some time, doing consulting a bit and taking some time off. I was still building games, but ended up making, a lot of friends who were a bit older than myself. And if you guys have ever been to Japan, or particularly Tokyo, that even the oldest communities are really high tech, like they're playing video games on their phones or on their PCs. And at some point when I was like kind of playing around and building my own game, and also exploring like smart contracts, it's like Ethereum had kicked off. Ended up meeting like older folks who were playing these games, but in particular, like they were MMORPG games, but they were always keenly focused, I noticed, in particular experiences, right? And I kind of realized at that point that, a lot of times when we build games like MMORPGs, a lot of folks focus on the grinding part. There's a wider breadth or a wider audience of individuals that kind of want to experience maybe the community, right? And so, like, for example, in that case, when I met these older folks who became my friends, they were playing the shopkeeper. And he played the shopkeeper because he just like interacting with people. And so we go into this kind of RPG world, and that's what you do. He pretty much collected or sold or traded. And so I guess he would go in there like a few hours a day, back and on and off. And then someone else, that I met, like just to go in there and play the fishing game. And that's pretty much what we want to do. And so that kind of always stuck with me, as I kind of kept on building like my own personal games and making friends. And so when later I came back to the US and started getting more into immersive reality, research, and more towards gaming, we ended up building, for example, this what people call like a Ready Player One suit. So if we kind of like Google telesuit, that's the name. You put my name, you see it. Ended up thinking about how this integrates and comes all together, and so along those lines, I met my co-founder, Sean. I think he's here, Sean Su Lin, and he was doing a lot of like VR research. So he was building his own game engine. He was looking into, how to make VR experiences more immersive and how they could be used for different, health related issues. So close to the research field of human computer interaction. And so, in all honesty, like we were doing different hackathons, probably like we've won together more than 20 hackathons. And so we touch upon like, like a whole bunch of different blockchains, like Harmony One, Binance Smart Chain. I became like a Binance fellow at some point and then left. We ended up doing Avalanche, early on Ethereum, Cosmos, for example. I love this guys over there. Uh, but then, the pandemic hit, and so everybody was put on hold, and so we were like in our homes for about a year, kind of still trying to do research together remotely. And it just we realized that a lot of the tech that we were building, within our research labs, which related to like the game engine stuff, and they related to things like content generation or generative 3D models. So, for example, the ability to create 3D models just using random data. So, uh, the true potential of this tech wasn't as much in the physical space, rather in the virtual space. So, meaning the ability to create, virtual worlds or a virtual world where you can create almost anything. So, for example, the research that we were doing with robots, where we kind of wanted to allow the robots to gain context when speaking to someone, that was a conversational agent. And that was a narrative generation component. And then we look at the 3D model stuff. Well, this fit in with our work that we did where we wanted the robot to sort of infer where objects were located. So the robot had to generate some sort of model. Um, and so it just made sense for us to kind of like, implement into a game or integrate into some games. And so, a year through the pandemic passed, Sean and I kept on building. We did some AR stuff. And then we finally joined Gitcoin Kernel, which the Gitcoin Kernel Fellowship. And, at that point, Sean and I said, hey, let's build something. We've been doing this different hackathons. We had like all this tech. Let's build something, a game for the long term. And so we were like, we're done with doing hackathons. This is it. Let's build something, like, honestly, because we had gotten grants from Chainlink, Aave, and other places. So we just wanted to build something like for long term, right? And build a bigger community than we had before. And so we joined Gitcoin Kernel, and we ended up meeting Sam, or SBF. And then he mentioned Solana, and so he's talking about gaming, and he mentioned Solana, and then we got brought on stage, and he's like, and also you should come on Solana and Serum, and we have this hackathon happening right now, and it ends in like 2 weeks. And so, Sean and I pretty much looked at each other and we were like, should we do it? I mean, Solana was like one of the only chains we hadn't touched, and we're like, all right, we're like, F it, let's go ahead and try it out. And so 2 weeks in, we had to learn the entire stack of Solana, which is different, programming model from Ethereum. The tools weren't ready, honestly. There wasn't a wallet, but we made it work. We created, I would say, it was a proof of concept of like some MMORPG game, which was a bit of a mixture between the game Overcooked and an RPG, where essentially you had to go hunt monsters to get ingredients, and these ingredients were rare. They had a rarity table, and so they're NFTs, and you fight them, and you mint them, then you cook a dish, and you can enter a tournament. And so from then on, we ended up winning the Solana hackathon. So I think they said we were kind of like the first like more polished games that were built on, and so we were pretty psyched. We loved the team really behind Solana. We met Anatoly and Raj, and then Bartosz and everybody else. And Tristan, like pretty much from FTX, was a key person that brought us on. He pulled us in into Solana, and it just a good fit for us. And so from then on, we won the hackathon. And we were building the game that discussed as you were, but then we felt like we needed to kind of like expand from this small concept of like a cooking RPG game and build something where we can integrate the previous tech that we talked about. And so that's really where OpenEra came about. And, like behind the scenes, Sean used to do a bit of professional gaming, amateur professional gaming back in China. And Tomas is listening in. He's a huge, like, hardcore RuneScape gamer. And I also back then used to play RuneScape. So I was kind of eager to like play around and think about the economic models that could be implemented, in a RuneScape or Albion Online kind of game. So that is in short. And so now we're ready, honestly, getting ready to release a private alpha or a second version of a private alpha. soon. And also we have some new announcements that relate to our wallet.
That's that's super fascinating. Very rich history there, like in the space. Before we get into like more in depth on OpenEra, I'm actually curious, like, what drew you to the Solana ecosystem? You know, because it seems like the barrier to entry for you guys seemed pretty high because you had to like relearn everything. So, like, what was kind of the draw there?
So, I think if you've been across different chains, and top of my head, the ones that we explore have been, Ethereum in particular, the community, some of the L2s, Polygon. I love the Polygon folks. I met them like pretty early on. I'm actually part of a few DAOs and Polygon. I'm not sure if NF is here. I see Rare Pizzas and snacks from Pizza DAO. Other places, like Harmony, also back early on this year, they were still pretty nascent, and we love the team there. And Avalanche, all of them have different cultures, I think. Particularly the team internally and how much support they can provide you at any point in time. And so we joined Solana ecosystem at a point in time. It was an inflection point, I would say, because the documentation in Solana wasn't there yet, but just the fact that the tech was built out and was ready to be used was pretty impressive. So it's kind of saying, you found something that is not polished, but maybe stick around, you could polish it, and there's a great community, you can keep on polishing and making it turn it into a diamond. And so that was one thing, but also I would say, and I'm not speaking against other blockchains, but just the vibe and the culture behind Solana. Internally the team, when I talked to them, I talked to Anatol and Raj, was very different. It wasn't corporate. I encountered some blockchains who were a bit too corporate, really, on that side. I think they just wanted to build and bring builders on, which was a huge plus. And so we weighed the pros and cons, and we said, look, we want to build a game, but there isn't a wallet yet, right? But will that wallet be there in the next 5 to 6 months? And the answer was yes. So we looked at the tech stack. It was Rust, which is solid. Rust is pretty much the next generation language for everything. Polkadot is using it. Avalanche is also looking into doing that. And other chains that are using Rust. And then the second part was the community, So is there a chance for us to be one of the first games or one of the first products and kind of garner our community? And the answer there was yes. But I would say that particular initially for us, it was really the community that was there, the founding team, and also the opportunity. And yeah, we're really happy to be there. And we also love working with other blockchains and other communities. Our wallet is multi-chain, for example.
Yeah, with the game that you guys are planning to launch, can you kind of describe to us like what the gameplay is going to be like? Is it going to be very similar to how like RuneScape would play out, or World of Warcraft, and these kind of open worlds? And I'm also curious, like, how is it going to be different with like Web 3.0 and the new technology that's currently happening in the space?
I think you're muted, Urban.
Oh, okay. Oops.
No worries.
All right. So yeah, the core mechanics of OpenEra, are very similar to, I'd say, RuneScape and Albion Online. So you have your PvP, PvE. We're experimenting really on PvP stuff because I think we can go on a separate conversation long to talk about how you can change PvP once you have a crypto economic incentive. But one particular thing that it's a bit different from these games, or even from WoW, is that when you think about, for example, Albion Online being classless, right? So in Albion Online, you don't have any classes. Your class or who you are within the game is really defined by wearables. Like you can wear a staff, and you can maybe wear some kind of suit of armor, and that sort of defines your stats in the game. And for example, you start to think, okay, well, these are wearables. Well, where if these were NFTs? What does that mean for the gameplay? Could perhaps someone, grind and level up and maybe trade or lend or borrow someone else's skills? So that's when we start, creating different kinds of mechanics. And so, currently we are doing some formal analysis to see how they play out, but these are different opportunities that could come about. The other part is that when you think about traditional MMORPGs or traditional games, is always a notion of the marketplace, um, and so the marketplace is there because essentially you get to bring both like it's a two-sided market, right? You have a buyer and a seller, and essentially the games marketplace brings these together, and they could mediate the transactions. But what happens when you give users the opportunity to trade amongst themselves? What happens when you allow users to hold a reputation for the trades or the kind of equipment that they do, right? And what if perhaps now you can have a virtual space within the game? You could decorate it, you could buy land, and you could set up however you want, and people can engage with it. And what if perhaps that location that you bought is strategic to the game, and perhaps you had the opportunity to come in early and acquire this land in a strategic location. And so this is how like it's different from traditional Web 2.0 games where you have the ability to kind of improve upon peer-to-peer mechanics and also take advantage of economic incentives overall. And then we can go on and talk about different things that are currently in R&D and discussions, and like we're trying to model this out. But like one of the things that I'm very interested on, and I always talk about this, like, and Tomas just looked at me, was because I'm always like considering like unrestricted PvP. And so in traditional Web 2.0 games, some RPGs, unrestricted PvP is a no-no. Like, why would you want to allow people to just do PK anywhere? What happens to the new users and newcomers? And so, that's fine and dandy in Web 2.0 games because essentially you just get wrecked. You join in as a noob, someone just for fun is going to PK you, and that's it. You're done out of the game, right? You restart again. Your coins or tokens might get dropped there, and you have the opportunity to pick them up, or you get essentially someone just takes them. But if there's some kind of incentive, right, to be a good actor or be a bad actor, then things change. And it perhaps opens up the opportunity for even roles or careers within the game, right? If someone says, there's certain areas where maybe unrestricted PvK is allowed, then what could happen? Well, someone could become a bounty hunter, where essentially you can, hunt or try to catch someone who's always PKing. Or perhaps you can introduce a notion of NPCs, right, that have specific roles to patrol and take care of citizens. And so I could go on and that. And so it's very different from traditional games because, in essence, you could play as a gamer, you could play this game for like hours, but how boring or how enjoyable, right? What is the play mechanics of you just becoming maybe some sort of cop or guardian? Would you want to be that role forever? And so this is really how we're developing OpenEra, and how it stands out from different games. And then as an aside, the other component that we're keenly differentiating ourselves on from traditional Web 2.0 games and other Web 3.0 games is that we focus really on the utility of the NFTs and also the interactiveness of the NFTs. So not only having in-game experiences, but also off-game experiences. And this is where like our wallet, and the reason why we built it was really because we looked upon these like these amazing, legendary weapons that we built, and you look them up in a MetaMask or a Phantom wallet, and they're just boring, right? I would say that traditional Web 3.0 wallets or cryptocurrency wallets are boring wallets. And so there's an opportunity to kind of engage the user not only in-game, but off-game. And so the other part, then we can go into things like play-to-earn mechanics and more into, what we refer to by increasing the utility of NFTs. But I'll leave it up to you to ask me more.
Yeah, one thing I'm really curious about is will there be DAOs within the game? And if so, like will like clans or guilds and things like that be able to form their own DAOs? And then is it possible that there will be like an overarching DAO of like the entire world that all the players can participate in and vote?
Yeah, that's interesting, honestly, on top of mind. And I would personally say, I mean, the team thinks, we're thinking about it and they have a pretty much solid idea as a team. Personally, I think we should be, or everyone should be in the Web 3.0 space in research mode, R&D mode. Because, we've been talking to YGG, for example, and YGG has an idea of how to get their guilds involved and, the sub-guild system involved. But I think, for example, once you integrate or implement the guild model that YG has into the game, it kind of destroys the experience of the play for up and coming new members, right? And it kind of centralizes the way that NFTs are distributed towards these large guilds. So that could be fine for some people. That could be, not so good. And so I personally say we're still in R&D, but that's definitely one thing that we're thinking. And like Snacks here from Pizza DAO is here, and we're talking to other kind of DAOs and NFT projects where we want to give them the opportunity to have maybe their own small regions or worlds where they can go ahead and engage. And I mean, in terms of what we're thinking with Pizza DAO, we'll probably have some kind of like pizza hat drop for token holders of pizzas and stuff like that, and trying to kind of bring on board other kind of Web 3.0 communities. But as it relates to guilds within the game, I would honestly say that we're still kind of rethinking that model, because I personally feel that just adopting the traditional guild model that other, like Web 3.0 games or DAOs are taking, uh, will affect the gameplay, honestly.
I'm actually curious. I think the one thing that really fascinates me with these like open world Web3 connected games is the ability for kind of duplicate economies to be present. It's kind of like what you're hitting on with people having these jobs. But with that, I'm actually curious from like a developer standpoint. Could you see DeFi protocols potentially having to like buy plots of land, and as people use that plot of land for in-game banking services, your currency could actually be deposited to that DeFi DApp on the back end. So it's kind of like it has a rendered 3D model, like bank, if you will. But the DeFi DApp actually had to go in the game, purchase that plot of land, and then anytime the gamers are interacting with it, it's actually interacting with the DeFi protocol on the back end. Is that kind of how you see the future?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and actually, in our deck, when we share with people, we talk a bit about that. But not exactly as it relates to, to LAN. I think LAN is a bit of a different topic. But I think being able to integrate existing DeFi protocols into games and kind of provide an interface, it's the next generation of gaming. And so something that Web 2.0 can't do. And so we're definitely thinking about that. And also on the side, we have, like, for example, plugins for Unity and Unreal that allow people to connect to like smart contracts on Ethereum and now on Solana, which we're going to release. And going back to your point on the LAN, and I mentioned that it's kind of a bit of a different topic because I think from a speculative perspective, the notion of LAN sales, definitely drives up a lot of economical value for the game in a sense, right? But it also prices out a lot of gamers. And so, thinking about that carefully, at least like we're really thinking about that carefully because we don't want to price out, gamers. Like how many degens will grind out for 12 hours or 10 hours is the real question. I always ask a lot of folks that we have on calls and they're like, oh, dude, I want to play RuneScape on the blockchain. I'm like, well, realistically speaking, how many hours do you grind out in this game? And so, keeping ourselves faithful to folks who might enjoy playing this game but might not have the right economical resources, I think is key for us. And so that's why I mentioned it's a bit of a two different sides of the story to think about. But integrations are key, honestly.
Yeah, I wonder if integrating some sort of reputation-based currency that you just get just from straight up grinding and having that kind of as like a separate currency where you can buy these in-game plots. I wonder if that's kind of like a happy medium. But I'm actually curious, like what type of items are going to be in the game. I know we talked about land. Like what else will people kind of be able to marketize and sell in the game?
Well, I think traditional items really from any other kind of Web 2.0 game are gonna be there. We have some. Okay, so I think I guess I could speak about it, but we do have like a bit of a secret NFT project out in the wild right now, and so that's going to be useful at some point within the game. And so if you think about how RuneScape kind of did it and how World of Warcraft did it, some similar mechanics, but recently we've been in a few calls with some folks running some DAOs and discussing governance and how could we perhaps allow our community to generate content for us. And so that's a new thing that we've been thinking about. But as an aside, when you mention kind of what kind of items, the notion of behind our trading skills has been in our mind like lately tremendously, and perhaps there's an opportunity to do this right. Because, one thing to note really within having items in a quote unquote game or virtual economy is that you want to avoid hyperinflation. If any of you guys here have really grinded through any of these games, or some of the games really failed, is like, hyperinflation really kills you. And so this could happen for any item that is mined or minted, to even like any skill that is, minted. Like you could imagine oversaturating the market with like cooking skills or something, or something like that. And so being able to balance that out really is key for any Web 3.0 game.
Also, just a random thought. I was just thinking, like, how big is this uh, metaverse? If you will, of this game. Like, how big is this going to be, like size wise?
So, in all honesty, we've been developing this for the past 4 to 5 months, probably around that time. But it's based on a lot of the work that we've previously done. And so, really, our first official public release or public beta release is the tutorial island model. And so then we're targeting towards, around Q2 probably, or maybe a bit later, to doing like a larger scale release. And then from then on, we'll see where it goes. But we'd love to invite you guys to really our up and coming private feature test, because as I mentioned, outside of being an MMORPG, you have this notion of a metaverse, and so what that means, really, we hope to get some feedback on that.
Yeah, that'd be based. I'm definitely down. Also, wanted to ask you: is there going to be like dungeons or raids that these guilds can go and like do together and collect special items that have a rare drop?
Yep. I mean, I think that's like definitely needed. That's like a staple of like games like RuneScape and Albion Online. Like the way that we're trying to approach it, and again, this is feedback. Honestly, we're talking to a few folks on our Discord, and also like on the side is how to manage guilds. This is definitely a big question, but I think you know the ideal scenario for like how you would raid a dungeon, for example, is that either you have a guild or you're able to form a party dynamically, right? Like I meet you and I say, oh shoot, hey man, you have these weapons that I need. Or maybe I say, I'll become some kind of, I'll lead the party, and I onboard you to my party, and then we could sign an escrow agreement, right? Or a contract that says, we're in a party. And perhaps at the escrow agreement where I can say, all right, guys, you know what? I think you guys, have great skills. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand over weapons and armors to you. And so there's an escrow contract that could say that these items are only in your wallet, so you're holding them, or I have access to them momentarily until we, essentially clear the dungeon or finish the quest.
I'm actually curious. This kind of makes me think of. I was recently looking into New World, and I think that they have some sort of governing structure for the factions over certain cities. So I'm actually curious, like, what would that look like in a metaverse where maybe a DAO has to actually kind of take economic like ownership and kind of implement policies to run that region, and any sort of marketable trades that happen in that marketplace, there's kind of a fee that goes into their own treasury, and they have to kind of like, it's up to their economic responsibility, if you will, of that like particular region. Have you guys ever thought of kind of implementing something to that level?
Yeah, Chase, I think sorry, you cut off for the first half on my end. Can you repeat the question really quick?
Oh
briefly?
man, okay, yeah. So I was just saying, I was looking into open world recently, and I think a portion of that game, they have it to where like the factions own maybe a settlement, or like like a guild will own like a certain settlement, and they will create kind of the economic conditions of like what the fees will be whenever you go to like a marketplace or whatever, right? So I'm curious, like, have you guys ever thought about implementing economic models like that, where maybe certain cities, I mean, if there are larger cities within this game, like what would it look like if a DAO had to actually kind of like purchase a city, if you will, or somehow, and they kind of create that economic model within, and that way it kind of creates a like self-governing economic model within these larger coexisting models, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think all you're saying is definitely like the what any Web 3.0 game will achieve, and I would probably be overpromising to say that we could accomplish that in such a short time, but it's definitely the ideal scenario. But there's like so many unanswered questions, like when you think about that, because well, then what happens if this DAO runs the city, right, or owns this land? So if you've been in DAOs, managing DAOs and just the way that they personally work, a lot of things could go wrong. And if you look at games like, for example, shoot, just the name escaped my name. I think is Legions. There was this one game where essentially there was this huge guild that just essentially overtook this city because they thought that the other guild was just like they were being like jerks and they were PKing people, etc. And after they overtook the city, they pretty much became jerks themselves to everyone else. And so these are socio-economic questions, that you see happen in the real world, but once you have some sort of economic incentives that can be turned into some real world value, things change. But in ideal scenarios, right, the entire future of having just cryptocurrencies and gaming leads to that, the ability to do that, right? But then, I would pose back to you the questions or make you think about, what is that? What happens? Well, what do you think would happen if, there's a game developer and, they build this game and then essentially a DAO ends up buying like like a large region or a popular region in town for some reason, right? Maybe it's a malicious attack. They buy it, they pretty much pricing out people, they do whatever they want. Maybe it's a competitor, right? What would you do as a developer? Well, and essentially this entire, DAO that's on this region is decreasing your DAUs, right? Your daily active users. What would you do as a game developer? Or what do you think should be done?
Yeah, no, I think, I think in that moment, you definitely can't take any strong hand approach as I could really kind of collapse the entire ecosystem. But it's an important question to ask. I think it's something that, maybe you set KPIs to where you set kind of ranges, right? So you can't have extreme takeovers in a sense, but maybe it makes the game kind of like a little bumpy for a month or two during a portion of time. But no, I don't have the question right off the top of my head, but it's a good like reflect back type style question.
Yeah, one idea I kind of have is to do like a game wipe. So I don't know, every quarter you wipe the entire world and it's like a reset, right? If they're trying to make it fair for all players, that's pretty fair. Maybe you keep some sort of traits or your skills or items, but maybe the world wipes and you can kind of go in and reclaim.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually gonna. Yeah, can you bring Tomas up? He's actually he's leading a lot of the game design. I'll let him chime in on that too.
Yeah,
Because
which one?
he's the one with the zombie ape. Tomas, you want to raise your hand?
I see. I think. There's only one zombie ape I see, so it's got to be him.
Yeah, with the red cup, the striped cup.
Chase, do you
Okay.
see it? Anybody else see it?
I don't.
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
Why?
Okay. Yeah, I think, but then again, so that's a bit of a coercive approach, right? Because you're essentially, I mean, yes, I guess if beforehand you think about this, you said, okay, there will be a wipe, then I guess the community is okay with it. But, from where things are heading, and I mean, things are heading is because essentially people propose it and just goes that way. A lot of people are talking about persistent worlds, right? Virtual persistent worlds. And so the notion of wiping a game or, like just maybe even the economy, it's kind of against that trend, I would say. But it almost makes sense though for having types of mini games within these worlds. I think. I don't know if you guys play Rust. Anybody here
Yeah,
play
that's
Rust?
exactly what I was thinking about when you mentioned all this. Yeah, I love Rust.
All right, cool. Then your love or ideas because essentially within the game we're building like different mini games and we've been working towards developing like some Rust mechanics inside OpenEra, right? Actually, our first release was supposed to be last month with a battle royale, a no loss battle royale. We were using Serum though, and Serum was their product wasn't ready. They're releasing a new feature, so hopefully that'll come out maybe after Solana Lisbon. But in those scenarios, I would say that yeah, like doing a wipe makes sense, but in the context of being a tournament, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a challenge, and this it's so new, all of this. So I'm sure there'll be lessons learned from other projects that we can ingest, and I'm sure there'll be some really interesting scenarios.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. It seems like that there's going to be a lot of connectivity outside OpenEra's metaverse and getting data in and data out. Like, how do you guys plan on approaching that?
So are you referring towards the data itself that the game is processing, or are you referring to like transactions in particular?
Yeah, and just kind of like the connectivity, right? Like if there's DeFi protocols that are going to be involved, and you need that kind of connection, if you will, like outside the OpenEra metaverse, but stuff is still kind of coming through outside the metaverse that you guys are building.
Yeah, that's like an implementation side, but in our case, we're starting out with Solana, and we've been playing around like different multi-chain, features perhaps, but currently everything will be on Solana. So, at that point, it's I guess from the context of the game, it's just being able to either allow users to develop, for example, virtual LAN or infrastructure, and then connect them to a particular protocol, or just ourselves just linking that behind the scenes. It's not big of a deal. We've actually done it before. But I think I guess I thought your question initially was in terms of data. Like, what do you do with players' data? That's a different question I think that Web 3.0 games and users should have.
I'm also curious, like within the game, will you be utilizing VR or AR technology? I know you mentioned like making a wallet. A lot of the wallets are super boring. I've seen some NFT projects be able to utilize like AR technology through like their smartphones. You could see the 3D model in real space. I don't know if you guys are planning to do anything like that with the characters or the items.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this plays into our strategy. And so I guess I'll go ahead and retweet our previous video. But, going back to my earlier comments, when we were developing a lot of the assets and some of them was just AI generated, we thought it was pretty cool. And we looked at it in these 3D model software like Blender and Cinema 4D. And, just seeing them animated, there's a lot of a lot of value, right, for you to be able to see, hear, and even feel the assets. But when we went ahead and displayed them on like MetaMask, on Chrome browsers, or Phantom, that kind of magic sort of disappears. And so to us, we realized it's not only just the ability to create the content, right, in NFTs, but also how you consume it, right? And so current wallets or current applications don't provide you an immersive way to consume the content. And so from then on, we just started building kind of like what we call a gaming NFT wallet that allows you to do that. It allows you to do things like at a very simple level, very basic level, is decorating maybe your house, right, with your NFTs, and perhaps being able to connect them to other NFTs. So maybe if you have an audio NFT and you have like a regular JPEG NFT, you could put it on your wall, and then maybe you could link it to another NFT that plays that song. And so now when your friends come over, right, you tell them, hey, let me share you my virtual space or my augmented space. So you share that space with them, and they can literally walk up to the NFT that's on your wall and be able to see it and hear it. Now, the next step from that is, improving the interaction, and that relates to, how we're doing things different in terms of our wallet. So, for example, we're building the ability for people to do things like PvP and augmented space, and also the ability for other collections or NFTs to kind of create these immersive experiences. But yeah, I went ahead and shared the latest video for the wallet, and so you guys can kind of look at my latest tweet before the tag to kind of get an idea of the wallet.
Cool. I'm gonna pin it at the top of the Twitter space for you guys.
Hey, also Irvin, so near the end of these spaces, we typically bring on some people from the community to ask questions. Are you up for that?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Cool, perfect. Johnny, I'm bringing you on. You can go and ask him your question.
Yeah, I want to.
How you doing, Johnny?
And I want to give a quick shout out to
Let's
Poker House.
go.
I just saw them join in.
To who? I apologize.
Hey,
To Poker House.
Hey, shout out Poker House.
what's up, guys? How's it going?
Good. How are you, Johnny?
Good. Hey, Erwin, I really had a question for you. If you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna pin up a tweet for like a minute here. Because so I asked an Anatoly a question, and then he kind of gave me this reply, and I felt like some of the terms were a little bit technical or something.
Sure.
But then, I realized my brain's just not working because I read the rest of the tweet. I read it like another 3 times, and then it literally says what the VDF stands for and everything. But I was wondering.
You cut out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Johnny, sorry, you cut out.
Did you finish asking your question,
I think you might have cut out.
Johnny?
Yeah.
No.
Let me see.
Let's go and bring someone else up in the meantime. We can try to get Johnny's question.
We got another one. What's up, IP?
Hey guys, thanks for taking the question. I guess one, from a development approach standpoint, do you plan to take more of a kind of developing out in the open approach where you release a beta, say in the next 6 months, people have the ability to start testing and get familiar with the system, or are you trying to make more of a polished product and put something out in, a year or two? I guess just curious about what the overall kind of timeline and approach is with respect to how good of a product you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, no, and honestly, I would be honest, with myself and say that we've been very low key on the marketing side. I think we're very key behind the scenes, kind of trying to build the infrastructure and the tech beforehand, which is kind of unlike other projects. I sort of show you like a cinematic video, and it's not even like actual gameplay. Other projects are kind of just showing stuff, and so we do have built out a lot of stuff, and I think probably this week coming up to Lisbon, for example, we're gonna do another test flight release for the wallet itself, and now we also have a metaverse space that we're testing in private alpha, and so we're definitely gonna be starting out and doing private betas first, and then public second. But I think anybody here who's in this space, I'm down to give you guys access to this. So just feel free to tag me or like under the post, and we'll definitely do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I see some games like Star Atlas where I'm just like, this is going to come out in 2025 when 3 cycles later and no one cares anymore. So good to hear you guys are developing in public and being a little more transparent about what's going on behind the scenes. Just one other question real quick. DeFi Kingdoms, do you take any kind of inspiration from other games you're seeing out there? Could you put a DEX on this game to kind of add some economic value, or do you see that as being offset by, regulatory risk from having a DEX on the game? Thanks.
Yeah, that is like a tough question. So Serum is one of our supporters, and they gave us a grant early on, and the idea from that is to allow players to essentially build their own exchanges. And so I think earlier I mentioned that currently we have a world creator part where you can essentially put together like a small house or any kind of like mini castle if you have the resources, and then you can turn this into an exchange. And so behind the scenes, we just connect to Serum, and then you can create your own markets. So there's definitely the idea behind the scenes. Now the other part is really, from the regulatory perspective. And so, talking to our legal counsel, bit license in New York is kind of coming out of this thing where it's kind of impact a lot of NFT prospects. So we're on the lookout for on that. In all honesty, I think if there's a game that is really integrating cryptocurrency and NFTs, they are not or will not be accessible by US citizen. But we're working towards that to see if we can actually be able to reach the US market in a regulatory compliant way.
Thanks so much. I'll pass it on to the next person.
Yep.
Thank you, Hyperion, for coming on and asking that. Johnny, did you have your question ready? Or if there was a second part to that question?
Yeah, so I kind of sort of just realized that I didn't really. I mean, I was gonna ask really about like, what are some of the instances like you find yourself in a place where you can't yield some online results when you don't know what terms to search for, but
Yeah, I think I just saw your tweet,
yeah,
right?
it sounds simple like
It
that.
was your tweet. Yeah, actually, everybody here, I have Tomas and Sean listening to you. Yeah, we actually have our own hacker house, so we're all here coding, but
Are you in Chicago?
no, we're nearby. We stop by the Chicago office from time to time to Solana.
Okay, yo, stop by November 17th, please.
Okay, yeah. What's happening?
Because we'll be having a meeting. There'll be some of the Chicago Hacker House guys there, and we're trying to get Brett from FTX there as well, and some of the Monkey DAO members will be attending. So,
what's the name of the
something
meeting?
like that, maybe just some pizza. I'm gonna add you to the group if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely do it, and
Awesome.
I'll invite Brett and other Solana folks as well, and Tristan from FTX is also over there too.
Absolutely, yeah. We have Brett already in the members group, and then also Bartosz.
Okay.
But anyone local that's in the community, definitely more than welcome to join. Thank you so much. Yo, stay based, everybody.
Yo, stay based, and we
Yeah.
want pizza too, man. We like pizza as well.
Yeah, come on.
Yo, the craziest part, somebody, a member in the chat, he just put in that the place we were looking to meet at, like some federal agencies came down there and then like busted the two locations, and they like retrieved some kind of paperwork, something in the article about that, but not too clear. So we're working on a different venue or a different place. We gotta make this happen at. Yeah, Chicago life.
Interesting. Yeah, but I think you should reach out to Solana, Bartosz, and Jordan, and Tristan, who's been, a key towards the development here at OpenEra, is also over there in Chicago, so, they may be interested in definitely stopping by. But Johnny, yeah, to really answer your question, I think, yeah, I mean, personally, I just grind it out, but I've gotten to a point where sometimes it just makes sense to kind of step back, and maybe even take a shower. That's what I usually do sometimes, because I realize that sometimes when I'm either taking a shower or just sitting somewhere, everything just coalesces together. And I definitely say, really from experience of grinding a ton of hackathons, over the past year, and literally, like, if you go to my dev post, or I think I also have them on LinkedIn, you see the list of hackathons. Sometimes you just gotta step back and take a break. So, it's always a critical thing. But definitely keep on grinding, and drink water, and stay friendly to everyone.
Yo, that's what's up, man. You said it. Yeah, a cold shower, definitely. Things like that, and drink more water. Oh man, that's a good feeling. Nice to be here. Appreciate you again, everybody. Stay based. I'm gonna switch back to listening.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, John.
Enjoy the pizza. Hey, Irvin.
Go
ahead, Super.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
I had a question for the audience. Is there in-game video, or video of in-game play out there anywhere yet?
Yeah, there's like 3 videos out there. One of them was first from the Solana hackathon after the next development, and there's also another video out there from the latest tutorial island version. And probably probably in a week or two, we're gonna release another video, probably after Solana Lisbon.
Is that on a YouTube account, or how can they find that?
Yeah, it's in the Solana account, and I believe we also just set up our YouTube account. I think Fina is managing that right now. Fina, is it OpenDiveHQ?
Yep. Right now, there's our OpenEra lore video. The first part of our lore was just released, so if you want to go check that out, that's the first video on our OpenDive YouTube.
Yeah, but if you guys definitely want to test out this new feature, I'm pretty psyched about this new feature and sort of being able to interact with people. Do let me know. So maybe tag me on the comment or something, and I'll get you guys on board. It's actually on test flight right now.
Awesome. Does anyone else from the audience have questions? We'll give you like a few more seconds. Just hit that request button.
I just want to say, by the way, Irvin, this has been a really based discussion, and I personally am super excited to test OpenEra and just wait for it to come out. It sounds like a really cool game.
Yeah.
Dope.
There's something just extremely fascinating around creating these digital metaverses, these like digital worlds that we can kind of replicate real world value in a sense. It's kind of like creating economies within economies. I find that aspect of this technology and this creativity just like really fascinating. So it's gonna be really interesting to see your guys' journey from here, and see what you guys build.
Thanks
Yeah,
a bunch.
second everything they said. Just really appreciate the time, and I also really enjoyed your background at Goldman Sachs. I think that's like a really unique perspective we haven't heard on the show before, and yeah, it's definitely really cool to see banks starting to accept the technology and adopt it.
Don't forget that every company is a game company, one way or another. That is the future.
We're all playing a game, even our current system. It's just one game.
Welcome to the metaverse.
All right, just really appreciate the time. I guess like any closing thoughts you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, my comment was that every company is a gaming company in a sense, because even no matter what kind of product you're building, essentially in the future will be usable in a virtual world. I think the future of the metaverse is not just virtual spaces, but the bridge between the physical and the virtual. And it's what we call a cyber physical. So I think everyone should be on the lookout for that. And yeah, stay safe. Thanks a bunch. And then if you guys want to, come and try our stuff, definitely hop on our Discord, and love to have everyone on board. And thanks a bunch for your time. Much love.
Yeah, absolutely. We do record these. Are you cool with us posting it on our YouTube?
Yeah, 100%.
Could you actually send that
Sweet.
over somehow to one of us? That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Once it's edited, I'll post it. I'll send the link.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.